In a busy market full of people, a black maid was quietly going about her work. She was someone who often went unnoticed, blending in with the many faces around her. She was gentle in her actions, hard-working, and kept to herself. The market was always loud with sounds of people talking, vendors shouting, and children laughing. It was a place full of life, where everyone had their own story. But on this particular day, something different happened, something that caught the attention of everyone there. As she moved carefully between the stalls, carrying baskets filled with fruits and cloth, some people in the crowd noticed her. Among them, a few men started to whisper and point. They did not like seeing her around. Slowly, their whispers turned into words, and their words became actions. Suddenly, from out of nowhere, one of the tormentors reached out and grabbed her collar. It was a sudden and shocking moment. The maid was caught off guard. The collar was seized roughly, and she was pulled slightly towards the man. The hands that grabbed her were not gentle. They had a harshness that spoke of cruel intent. The crowd around them froze. Some people stepped back, unsure of what was happening. Others watched silently, afraid to interfere. The noise of the market faded for a moment, replaced by tension. Many of the faces in the crowd showed surprise and worry. No one had expected such an act of meanness here. The maid's heart pounded, not just from the physical shock, but from the fear of what might come next. Would someone help her? Would the tormentors go too far? In that moment, the black maid looked directly at the faces of the tormentors. Her eyes were calm, but deep inside a storm was rising. The people around could see her surprise, but also something else, something powerful hiding just beneath the surface. Many expected her to cry or yell for help, but instead she stayed quiet. She did not struggle or scream. Instead, she held her head high, refusing to show weakness. All eyes were on her now. The silence in the market felt heavy, like everyone was waiting for her next move. The men holding her collar were also watching, curious and maybe a little confused. They did not expect her to stay so calm. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then, slowly, a single question filled the air, not from the tormentors, but from the maid herself, spoken low but clear. "Why are you doing this?" Her voice was steady, with a quiet strength that surprised everyone. The tormentors were unsure how to answer. They had planned to embarrass her, to make her feel small. But her question turned the situation upside down. It made them stop and think, and it made the crowd begin to see the whole scene differently. The maid's question was not just words. It was a challenge to the cruelty around her. It was as if she was telling the tormentors that she was not afraid, not broken by their actions. This unexpected courage started to change the mood in the market. People who had been holding their breath began to relax, some even whispering to each other about how brave she was being. While the maid stood there, calm and collected, other voices in the crowd began to rise. A few people stepped forward not to fight, but to speak up. They said things like, "Leave her alone," or "This is not right." Their words were not loud or angry, but firm and clear. It was a small voice of support growing among the bystanders. This gave the black maid a little more hope. She knew that sometimes courage grows from the smallest acts of kindness and words of support. The men who had grabbed her collar looked around, seeing that they were no longer the only ones with power in that moment. The crowd was no longer silent and still. The atmosphere had shifted from fear to a quiet resistance. The maid's calmness, combined with the small but growing support from the crowd, made the tormentors rethink their actions. They loosened their grip on her collar and hesitated. The moment felt like it could end in many different ways. The crowd watched closely. Some people's hearts beat fast, wondering if the maid would make a sudden move or if the tormentors would do something worse. But the maid held her peace, still standing tall. She showed everyone that even in the face of cruelty, one could remain strong and unshaken. Soon after, the tormentors let go completely and took a step back. The market slowly returned to its usual sounds, but something inside the people who had watched changed forever. They had seen a simple act of bravery that spoke louder than any shouting or fighting could. For the black maid, this was not just about that day or those tormentors. It was about standing up for herself, with dignity and calm, even when it seemed like the whole world was against her. And for the people around, she became a silent teacher, showing how courage can grow quietly without noise, and how one small act can inspire many others. From that day on, the maid continued her work in the market, but she walked with a new kind of strength. People began to look at her differently. No longer just a quiet worker, but someone who had shown true bravery in a moment when it was needed most. And the story of what happened spread slowly through the town, reminding everyone that courage can come from the most unexpected places, and that standing up calmly can sometimes be the strongest move of all. Days passed after the Black Maid's quiet but powerful act of standing up in the market, and the place where life always seemed rushed and noisy began to change in small but meaningful ways. What had once been simple to ignore was now noticed, and people started paying more attention to the kindness and respect they showed each other. It was as if the maid's brave moment had opened many eyes, helping people realize how important it was to treat everyone fairly. The market had always been full of movement and chatter. Vendors shouted prices, buyers bargained hard, and children ran between stalls. But beneath the noise there was often a quiet unease. Not everyone was kind or careful, and some were treated unfairly. Now, though, after that unforgettable day, a gentle shift started spreading through the crowd like warmth on a cold morning. People who had once stood by silently began to speak softly in support of those who worked in small, often overlooked jobs. The Black Maid herself noticed these changes clearly. When she moved through the market with her baskets, several people greeted her with smiles or kind words, where before they had barely looked her way. Some vendors nodded to her as she passed, and a few even offered help without being asked. This was new, and it made the maid feel less alone. She understood that change does not come quickly or easily, but these small acts showed promise of better days. The kindness she had inspired was like a thread slowly weaving people together into a stronger community. Even the children seemed to carry a new lesson in their play, learning to respect others, even when they were different or less powerful. One morning, as the market woke up with its usual bustle, a group of workers gathered near a small stall to talk quietly. They had heard about the maid's courage and what it had meant to the people around her. Some spoke of times when they had felt powerless or treated unfairly, but didn't know how to stand up. Now, hearing her story, they felt a spark, an idea that maybe they could be brave too. The maid joined the group as a listener more than a speaker. Her calm presence helped them find comfort and strength. It was clear to them that courage wasn't about being loud or fighting, but about having faith in oneself. They made a silent promise to look out for each other and to speak out gently against unkindness whenever they saw it. This growing spirit of care and respect began to spread beyond the market. Nearby neighborhoods heard about the maid's bravery and the kindness it inspired. Families talked about it at their dinner tables, telling their children how important it was to be strong with kindness. The story became a quiet lesson in many homes, reminding everyone that courage could be gentle and still powerful. Meanwhile, the tormentors who had caused trouble that day seemed to vanish from the market's busy corners. It was as if the kindness and courage of the people had chased away the shadows where cruelty once hid. The market no longer felt like a place where fear ruled, but rather a place where kindness could grow like wildflowers in the spring. The Black Maid continued her daily routine, but she moved with a stronger heart. She worked quietly, always careful and strong, knowing that the courage inside her had helped more than herself. It had reached into the hearts of many people. She was no longer just a worker in the crowd. She was a symbol of hope, of quiet bravery that anyone could find within themselves. One afternoon, as she carried a basket of fresh vegetables across the market, she saw a small boy looking lost and scared near a busy road. Without hesitation, she stepped closer and gently took his hand, guiding him safely away from danger. The boy smiled up at her with wide eyes full of trust. It was a simple moment, but it showed the big heart the maid carried inside. Her kindness helped not only herself, but also others around her. The community slowly began holding small gatherings where people shared stories and helped solve problems together. These meetings were simple but powerful. People learned to listen better, to speak with respect, and to support each other without judgment. The Black Maid was often there, her quiet smile encouraging others to believe in kindness as a real force for good. At one such gathering, an older man stood and spoke softly about how seeing the maid's courage had changed his view of strength. He said, "True strength is not loud or cruel. It is patient, kind, and steady." The room filled with quiet nods and smiles as the words touched everyone's hearts. It was a reminder that their community could grow stronger when kindness became the most important rule. As days turned into weeks, the Black Maid's story became a quiet but steady light in the region. People from other towns visited the market, curious to see the place where kindness had won over cruelty. They wanted to learn from the strength the Maid showed, a strength that came from within and spread outward like sunshine on a cold day. Sometimes the Maid still faced challenges. Life was not always easy, and old habits of cruelty or fear tried to creep back. But now she was not alone. The community she helped inspire stood by her and each other. When troubles came, they faced them together with courage and kindness. This made the market a safer and happier place for everyone. The Black Maid never sought attention or praise. She remained humble and hard-working, always ready to help quietly. Her courage was a quiet song that many learned to hear and follow. It taught people that no matter how hard life may seem, standing firm and kind can make a difference. One evening, after a long day working in the market, the Maid sat quietly under the soft glow of the setting sun. She thought about how far she had come, from a moment of fear when her collar was grabbed to now, when she helped others find their own strength. She smiled softly, knowing that her peaceful courage had changed not only her life, but the lives of many around her. Her story was no longer just about one act. It had grown into a powerful message of hope, kindness, and resilience. It reminded everyone that kindness is a form of strength and that standing tall does not always require fighting. Sometimes, it only asks for a heart full of courage and the belief that good can always win. And so, the Black Maid's quiet bravery lived on in the hearts of the people, guiding them through difficult times and helping to build a community full of respect and care. Her gentle strength became a legacy, one that taught the world how important peace, kindness, and courage can be in changing lives for the better. After the crowd began to speak up and the tormentors retreated, something new started to grow among the people in the market. What had been a day filled with fear and silence slowly turned into a story of courage and community. The Black Maid's quiet strength had not only changed the way the tormentors acted, but also the way everyone in the crowd thought about standing up for what is right. This was the start of a turning point. The market was a busy place where people came from all over to sell and buy goods. It was usually loud and sometimes chaotic, but today it felt different. The people moved with a new energy, as if what they had just witnessed had given them hope. Conversations began to flow, and more people found the courage to talk about how they felt. Stories of kindness and bravery started to come out, and people remembered moments when they had seen strength in others or wished they had been braver themselves. Among the crowd, a few kind people went over to the Black Maid, offering quiet words of support. They didn't make a big scene or shout praises, but their kindness was deep and real. One older woman touched the Maid's shoulder gently and said, "You showed us all what it means to be strong. We will not forget today." These words carried weight, not because they were loud, but because they came from a place of true understanding. The Maid nodded, but her eyes held a wisdom beyond her years. She was used to hard work and quiet days, but now she felt something different, a feeling that she was part of something bigger. The courage she had shown had started to bring people together. More than that, it had begun to challenge the cruel attitudes that sometimes lived in the shadows of the market and town. From that day, some changes slowly began to happen around her. People who had once ignored the struggles of workers like her started to pay attention. They saw the importance of treating everyone with kindness and respect, no matter their place in the world. Small acts of care began to ripple through the market. Vendors helped each other more, strangers smiled at each other, and the loud voices of cruelty were heard less often. It was not a perfect change, but it was a start. The Black Maid kept working, carrying her baskets and cleaning with the same care as always. But now her steps were lighter and her spirit felt stronger. She no longer felt alone in the busy market. She had seen that standing calmly but firmly could inspire others. Her strength was like a quiet fire that warmed those around her and gave them courage. Word about what had happened traveled beyond the walls of the market. Nearby villages and towns began hearing stories about the Black Maid who did not flinch when others tried to hurt her spirit. People told these stories to their families and friends, each time adding hope and strength to their own lives. It was a story that reminded everyone that bravery does not need to be loud or violent. It can be silent but unbreakable. In the market, a few people who had witnessed the event started to organize small meetings. These were not formal or grand, just simple gatherings where people spoke about fairness, kindness, and how to help each other. The Black Maid was invited to some of these meetings. She did not speak often, but when she did, her words were calm and thoughtful. Her quiet voice encouraged others to believe in their own strength. Some young people, especially, began to see her as a role model. They looked at her calm face and thoughtful eyes and learned that true courage could be found in quiet moments. This gave them hope, a message that even if they were small or afraid, they could still stand strong in their own way. The Maid's story also made some of the elders think deeply. They began to understand that respect and kindness were the foundations of a strong community. They agreed to watch out for unfairness and cruelty more carefully. Slowly, respect grew in places where before there had been silence or fear. One day, while working at the market, the maid noticed a young girl being teased by other children. The girl looked scared and small, much like the maid had once felt when the tormentors had grabbed her collar. Without hesitation, the Black Maid stepped forward. She spoke softly but clearly to the group of children, telling them to be kind and to stop their teasing. The children listened because they had seen how much the maid was respected. This small moment showed that kindness and courage could protect others too. The courage the Black Maid showed became a quiet but strong force in the market. People learned that standing up for each other did not always need loud voices or fights. Sometimes, a peaceful but firm word was enough to change what was happening around them. Days later, the maid found herself thinking about what had happened again, but not with fear. She thought about the crowd, the people who had helped, and how the tormentors had finally stepped back. She felt proud, not because she had won a battle, but because she had stayed true to herself in a moment when it was hard to do so. This feeling stayed with her every day, giving her strength to face whatever challenges might come. Her story reminded many that each person has a power inside them. It does not need to be loud or showy to be strong. It can be a calm heart, a steady voice, or a kind hand reaching out. The Black Maid had shown that sometimes the strongest fight happens in silence, and that fight can inspire others in the most powerful way. The community began to grow closer because of this. People looked out for one another more. They helped when someone struggled and spoke against unfairness in small but meaningful ways. The Black Maid's quiet bravery had opened their eyes to what kindness and courage could do. The market became not just a place of buying and selling, but a place where people learned to respect each other. And through it all, the Black Maid continued her simple work, carrying her baskets and moving through the crowds with a calm confidence that spoke louder than words. In the soft shadows of every day, her quiet courage became a light that guided others. People remembered her not as a victim, but as a hero in her own right. A hero who taught them about strength, kindness, and standing tall without shouting. Her story became a part of the market's heart, a shining example of how one calm, brave act can bring many people together to build a better, kinder world. It was a lesson for all. Sometimes the greatest power lies in peace and quiet courage. And in that busy market, where life was always moving fast, the Black Maid's peaceful strength left a mark that no one could ever forget. After the surprising calmness and strength the Black Maid showed when her collar was grabbed, the crowd around her began to shift. The people who were watching closely felt something change in the air. What everyone expected to be a scene full of fear and anger turned into something far different. Instead of breaking down or fighting back angrily, the maid stayed peaceful but strong. This moved people in a quiet but powerful way. The market continued to hum with its normal noise. Vendors yelling prices, children running between stalls, and animals moving around. But now, many eyes stayed focused on the maid, waiting to see what she would do next. It was strange how a simple act of calmness could hold so much power. People began to realize that the maid was not just any worker going about her day. Here was someone with real courage. Her steady voice and calm eyes told a story of secret strength, something many had never seen so clearly. Some of the crowd began to murmur softly among themselves, sharing their surprise. They whispered about how wrong it was for those men to treat her badly, and how brave she was to speak to them without fear. A few of the people who had been watching with doubt or uncertainty started to feel ashamed for simply standing by earlier. It became clear to them that this woman deserved respect and kindness, not cruelty. The maid, sensing this change in the crowd, moved carefully but confidently. She said nothing more to the tormentors, knowing that speaking again might start more trouble. Instead, she gave no sign of fear or weakness. Her calmness was like a shield that protected her from the anger aimed at her. Children who had been watching from nearby stepped closer, their eyes wide with admiration. A mother nearby quietly told her own child, "See how she stands tall? That's how we should be when someone is unkind." But even as the crowd's mood softened, the men who had seized her collar still looked unsure. Their faces showed anger mixed with confusion, as if they could not understand why they had lost power so easily. The strength the maid showed did not fit their plan. They expected fear or anger, but not silence mixed with courage. Slowly, one of the men took a step back, glancing at the people around him. The other tormentors hesitated too. As the tension lifted slightly, the black maid took the chance to shift away from the men. Without rushed movements or panic, she stepped free from their grasp and walked toward the crowd who had begun to gather. There was no running, no shouting, just quiet strength that inspired the people to look at her with new respect. She did not ignore the stares or whispers. Instead, she met the eyes of those watching and nodded gently. It was a small gesture, but it said more than words could. It said, "I am still here and I am not afraid." At that moment, people began to realize something important. The maid's peaceful response was not weakness, but a kind of power people rarely noticed. She showed that standing calm could be an act of bravery stronger than any shout or fight. A few strong voices from the crowd now began to speak up clearly against the tormentors. They told the men to stop and to leave the maid alone. They said it was wrong to treat someone like that in public. The crowd encouraged each other to stand with the maid, and slowly more people found the courage to speak. The market, which had been filled with fear and tension moments before, started to feel warmer and safer once again. The message was clear. Everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are. This sudden change surprised the men who had caused the trouble. They could feel their power slipping away as more eyes judged them and more voices spoke against their actions. In response, the tormentors stepped even further back. They looked around and saw that no one supported them anymore. The market was no longer a place for their cruel act. Slowly, they moved away, disappearing into the busy streets. Their faces showed confusion and anger, but they knew they had lost the fight because the maid's courage had brought the crowd together. As silence returned to the busy market, a feeling of relief washed over the people. The black maid rounded the corner, her steps steady, her head still held high. Many people smiled at her quietly or nodded in respect. Some offered small words of encouragement like, "Well done," or "You were very brave." She thanked each one with a gentle smile, but her mind was calm and focused. She knew the moment was over for now, but the message she sent had already started to change hearts. Soon the market life picked up again, but those who had seen the event could not forget it. The story of the maid's unexpected strength quickly became a topic of many conversations. People talked not just about what happened, but about how someone could stand quietly and still be so powerful. The maid had shown that respect does not come from fighting or shouting, but from holding on to dignity even in the hardest moments. Among those who spoke in favor of the maid, many said they were proud to live in a place where kindness and courage existed. Some older merchants said they would watch out more for workers and anyone who might be treated badly. Others promised to stop ignoring cruelty when they saw it. The black maid's calm standing became a kind of light for everyone, a reminder of human strength and quiet courage. At home that evening, the maid thought about the day's event. She knew life would not always be easy, but something inside her had changed. She understood that courage was not loud or angry, but steady and soft like a flame that refused to go out. She hoped her calmness would inspire others who felt afraid, telling them that they could stand strong without fighting or breaking down. Her story spread slowly through the town and into nearby places. Many who had never met her but heard her story felt courage growing inside their own hearts too. The black maid became a symbol of how even the smallest and quietest people could stand tall when others tried to bring them down. Her brave stillness taught a simple but important lesson. Sometimes the greatest power is in the calm strength you show when the whole world seems against you. Throughout the days and weeks that followed, the Black Maid continued her work. She carried baskets, cleaned stalls, and moved through the market with the same quiet confidence she had shown before. This time, however, there was a new respect in how people looked at her. Some greeted her warmly as if she were a hero who had fought without raising a hand. Others smiled kindly, offering help without hesitation. But the maid never let fame or praise change her. She remained the same humble and hard-working person, always ready to help others quietly and kindly. She believed that courage was not about being loud or better than anyone else. It was about standing firm, calm, and true to oneself, no matter what happened. The crowd's respect for her was not just because of the event. It was because they saw the strength living quietly in her every day. The Black Maid's story became a soft but steady reminder to face life bravely, with kindness and calmness, even when hurt or fear comes near. She taught the community that suffering does not need to break a person, and that one small, peaceful act can inspire many to stand up for what is right. And in that busy market, where life always moved fast, her gentle bravery left a lasting mark, one that would be remembered for a very long time. Time moved on in the busy town where the market stood, and the story of the Black Maid continued to ripple through everyday life. What began as a sudden moment of courage when she did not bow to cruelty had grown into a quiet movement of kindness and strength. This movement was not loud or flashy, but steady and deep, spreading through the hearts of many people, changing how they treated one another. The Black Maid still walked through the market, carrying baskets, helping vendors, and working with care and skill. She never sought attention or praise. Her bravery came from inside, a quiet flame that shone brightly even in the hardest moments. People who saw her felt encouraged. They learned that courage was not about loud words or wild actions, but about calmness and belief in oneself. Many began to see the Black Maid as more than just a worker. In their eyes, she became a symbol of hope, a living example that any person, no matter how small or quiet, could have great strength. They admired her for showing that kindness and courage often go hand in hand, and that standing tall means standing true to your heart. The market, once a place filled with noise and worry, had become a community of care. Vendors helped each other more, and buyers treated sellers with respect. Strangers started to smile at one another, and even children learned that kindness made life better. The Black Maid's courage had planted a seed that grew into something beautiful. Outside the market, the story traveled far and wide. People in other towns heard about the maid who faced tormentors without fear and stayed calm in the face of cruelty. Parents told the story to their children at bedtime, using it as a lesson about bravery and kindness. Teachers shared it as an example of how peaceful strength could change the world. Even those who had never met the maid felt a connection to her story. They saw in her a reminder that everyone has an inner light waiting to shine. Her courage became a source of comfort and inspiration, especially to those who felt scared or small in their own lives. She showed them that bravery often begins with just a single, quiet step. In the heart of the market, the Black Maid continued to inspire quietly by living her truth each day. She helped care for others in ways big and small, always patient, always kind. Her hands worked hard, but her spirit remained gentle and strong. She was proof that real heroes don't need to shout or fight. Sometimes, they just need to stand with calm courage and a loving heart. The community began to face challenges together, using the lessons learned from her example. When hardships came, people spoke softly but firmly about fairness and kindness. They reached out to each other with support, refusing to let fear or cruelty take hold. The Black Maid's bravery helped to build a foundation of trust and respect that held the town together. Sometimes visitors came from far away to see this special market and hear the Black Maid's story. They wanted to understand how simple acts of courage could create such strength in a place. They listened closely as people shared how one quiet woman's courage had turned fear into hope and silence into a song of kindness. The Black Maid never asked for fame or reward. What mattered most to her was knowing that her courage helped others find theirs. She believed that even the smallest acts of kindness could change the world if enough people chose to share them. and day by day that belief was coming true. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills and the market quieted, the Black Maid stood looking at the place that had once held sorrow, but now held so much hope. She felt grateful, not for herself, but for the people who had joined her in kindness and courage. Together they had made a difference. Her story was no longer just a single moment in time, but a living, shining example of what it means to be truly strong. It was a story about standing with calm in the hardest times, about kindness in the face of cruelty, and about the quiet power in every person's heart. As the light faded and the stars appeared in the sky, the Black Maid's courage continued to shine, a gentle but unyielding light that would guide countless others toward hope, respect, and love. Through her, the world learned that sometimes the bravest thing is simply to stand tall, be kind, and never give up on what is right. And in that busy market where life always moved fast, a simple truth remained. Real strength often comes quietly, but its impact lasts forever. The Black Maid's story was a gift, one of peace, courage, and the endless power of the human spirit to rise above hardship and bring light to even the darkest places.